We got 5 minutes on the clock, and we're going to talk today about mastering the art of a podcast interview. So you've got your podcast show up and running, and now it's time to interview your first guest, or maybe you're doing this 100 times and you want to up your skill a little bit. So after doing about 2,500 interviews, some of the common things that I hear often are, "That's a good question. That's a good question. That's a good question." That's when you know that you're heading in the right direction. With podcasting becoming so popular, especially during 2020, there's a lot of podcast hosts out there, and it is our job as podcast host to do a few things. One is to support our business or mission, right? If we're not supporting our business or mission with our podcast show, then why the heck are we doing that? To be TikTok famous, get a bunch of likes, get our validation from people that we'll never meet? I don't think so. Not for me. For me, it is to drive either my business or my mission forward. That's going to help me. It's going to help my family. It's going to help the clients that I serve and work with. So for me, that's why I do it. So as we're getting better, here are some tips that I have found to do better job as a podcast host. First, when it comes to bringing on a guest, the process for them should be smooth. And then you get this special time before you hit record to connect with them. All right. Use that time to find out what's important for them. You're going to get that in the form. You're going to get their copy and paste bios. All that stuff's going to be really valuable that you should look over. If you have your process set up pretty good, you could have your notes. I have my notes sitting in front of me when I'm having a conversation with them. So I could see some of the things that they copy and pasted or that they shared. But what I typically ask before the interview is, if there's one thing that you want the audience to hear from today's show, like what's that one thing that's so important to you? It doesn't even have to relate to, deals or whatever. So I hear what they're trying to say. And then my story arc, everybody wants to hear kind of the story. I try to get their message wrapped up in the story arc of our conversation. So if I forget everything else, I write down that one point. I have an iPad next to me, but you could use notepads or whatever. When they say this is the most important thing to me, it could be a belief system, it could be whatever. Your job as a podcast host is to wrap that into your message of what you do and how you do it, what they do, how they do it, but try to make sure that you give them ample time to talk about what's most important to them. I also ask them, because doing this a lot, I hate editing. I always ask them, are there any questions that I cannot ask you? Most people will say, I'm an open book. Sure. But I'm not trying to trick them like, hey, what's your views on politics or blah, 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 or whatever happened, in the last, censorship, right? Not trying to get people, like as I'm doing an interview. But what I do want to do is find out the topics that are important for them to stay away from. For example, I've interviewed politicians, CEOs of publicly traded companies, and I've interviewed someone who just had a really nasty divorce. And they're like, I just prefer not to talk about these. I can't talk about these policies yet, or I can't talk about what's going on in the public markets. So their job or their role or their life, their current situation might dictate them from talking about certain things. All right. So what's most important to them? What kind of things should we kind of steer away from? And you do that before the interview. And what that does is that decreases their anxiety and it gets you building a relationship with them. And then I go, you ready to go? We've got 55 seconds left here, but I go, you ready to go? We're going to go live in 3, 2, 1, or record, right? And I hit record. Now in the interview, here's some things to stay away from. Tell me your favorite book. Tell me your favorite show. Tell me your, favorite podcast show, or, there's, with all the podcasting out there, yes, those are like softball questions and you can do that. But if you just have a list of those kind of questions, it's going to make for a very boring interview for them. What you want to do is, hey, I'm going to wrap in some things like, what's your favorite book? But let me ask you this question. What's the most, in your favorite book, what stood out to you the most and why? And why was that important to you? There's 3 layers of questioning there around a topic. Most people go, what's your favorite book? Cool, that's it. Go deeper. And guys, I hope that you enjoyed that. we're going to work on mastering the art of podcast interview. We did that all in 5 minutes and 5 seconds. See you guys on the next one.